Everybody's got at least one piece of media they wish was translated. Maybe it's an obscure film, some incredible manga, or a beloved novel from another country, but no matter what, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone deep into the rabbit hole of whatever their favorite medium is that doesn't have something they wish would make it into their native language. And though I'm probably biased because this is a hyperfixation of mine, it feels like visual novels in particular are chock full of those great what-if wishes. While sometimes that wish goes unfulfilled or poorly fulfilled, such as will forever seem to be the case with Kraftwerk's Sayonara Oshiete or Leaf's White Album 2, other times it's granted, like with Type Moon's Mihoyo and with Alisoft's final entries into the Rant series. Of course, going untranslated for a long time can do a lot for a VN's reputation. I've talked extensively about this in my video on Possessioner, but you get this incredible mystique forming around it, where only a handful of people fluent in both English and Japanese are able to experience it, and those few who can tend to define its reputation. And such is the case with Black Psyche's Gore Screaming Show, a title which edoge players have hyped up since its release, and for most of its life has been left in its home language. I cannot say I'm one of those people who was around in the edoge and VNs fandom back when people were hyping this one up. That was in the mid to late 2000s when I was barely a sentient human, yet despite getting deep into this hobby 15 years after Gore Screaming Show came out, I've seen a significant amount of buzz around this game from both friends and people writing blogs. So you could have colored me surprised when the news broke on Twitter that Jast USA would be bringing the game into English and that it'd be releasing later this year in 2022. Wait, what do you mean it's 2023? Anyways, it's here, it's out, and it's goddamn fantastic. Gore Screaming Show doesn't feel like it's aged a day since its January 2006 release in Japan, and while it's quite different in every way from other Black Psyche games such as the previously reviewed Yami no Koe, it is without a doubt one of the most memorable, impactful, and impressive works from that time in Edo gaming. Focusing less on balancing bizarre and unique gameplay with quirky stories, and leaning more into the standard route-based structure of the time without fully losing itself as just another Gal game, scenario writer Kusakabe Matsuri and director Ueda Meto managed to deliver a tale of incredible characters, fascinating things about trauma and coming of age, and captivating third-person prose, coupled with gorgeous and creative art with a unique style, a great original soundtrack, and some top-notch presentation. This isn't to say that I think the game is flawless, because it does have problems, most notably with the front half of the game being less engaging than the back half, and the usage of erotic content, which, while generally being on point and contributing to the story, can feel shoehorned in. And yet, what lays at the core of Gore Screaming Show and what it most proudly presents is a story that's emotionally potent and resonant, with a fascinating exploration of how people grow up while fighting with the darkest parts of themselves. Trauma, self-hate, desires, selfishness, and so on. While not everything is going to click with everybody, it always manages to make its subject matter relatable and compelling. And what did hit me in this game didn't just hit close to home, it hit home with a goddamn laser-guided missile. So let's not delay things any longer and jump straight into one of 2022's most exciting localizations, and one of 2006's greatest titles, and discover just what's made this such a beloved classic. Our story takes place in then contemporary Japan and follows the life of Jino Kyoji, a young man moving back to his rural hometown of Kurihito City, following his parents moving to America for work. Now living with his occult magazine writing older cousin Yamiko, the change of location brings back a lot of familiar sights turned new with it. And that includes past friends now grown up, including his childhood best friend Akane, her best friend Aoi, and the school star Kika. But there are some new things too. This includes an odd little girl by the name of Yuka, who Kyoji first meets on his way to school and once again on a field trip to a nearby mountain with haunting urban legends of a man-eating demon. With a delicate and gentle appearance contrasted by a personality that flips between cruel and sadistic and cute and caring, Kyoji's life and the lives of those around him soon take turns for the worse when Yuka's darker sides are revealed to them, and with it, a monster by her side by the name of Gore Screaming Show. What begins as a peaceful time in a nostalgic town soon turns into a time of unbelievable horror, one that no worldly forces can explain nor solve as the boundaries between reality and surreality fade, and Kyoji is left to face his darkest fears, seeking solace in the ones he loves and realizing the secrets laying beneath the cute, cruel, and seemingly damaged girl. As far as root-based bishoujo gay premises go, Gore Screaming Show has by far one of the most unique that I've seen. A horror mystery title about a guy in a small town who, alongside the woman he chooses to fall in love with, has to face an evil little girl with her mysterious robotic companion tied to unknowable eldritch occultic forces, realizing there's more complexity to the people he once thought of as villains as him and others cope with their past and future as people in order to grow. The way this premise is executed sits in a perfect in-between for fans of horror and bishoujo games, with clearly defined and separated roots that show different sides of each character and the cast and the world itself, without the focus being placed squarely on the woman in question. Akane's route is as much an exploration of Yuka and Gore as it is her own feelings, Aoi's route is as much on Kyoji and Yamiko as it is her, and so on. Basically, think more like the free routes of Fate Stay Night with their intertwined world building and lore, rather than Canon's mostly independent routes. GSS is definitely not as intimidating as Fate in terms of content, though. I cleared the game in 15 hours, seeing all the good and some of the bad ends, with other people reporting taking upwards of 30 or 40. I might just be a quick reader, though I also held skip down and repeat scenes which may have shortened my playtime. Regardless, you're still gonna get your money's worth, but aren't necessarily gonna have to devote a couple weeks to clearing this one. And personally, I really like this. The game feels briskly paced with little filler and leaves you with a sense of wanting more but not needing more. The kind that makes you want to seek out more works by the studio, not to clear up plot holes, but to see what else they're capable of creating and get more of the same great vibes. That said, GSS is very different from the Black Psych norm in that there is significantly less attention paid to gameplay when compared to something like Yami no Koei or Minded Blood. You aren't going to find any shipping simulations or massively complex route structures here. Instead, you've got the familiar choice-based style of play. As far as titles like that go, however, GSS is probably one of the most thoughtfully designed and accessible to play without a guide. Similar to a game like Sakura Wars, most choices are accompanied by a small sound effect and visual indicating affection with a specific girl has gone up, and while the good choice isn't necessarily always the correct one, the game generally does not try to deceive you. And you can't win over every single girl easily, you have to make compromises. A great example of this is that getting on Aoi's route requires being a bit distant or even mean towards Akane at some points, which comes back in how she treats Kyoji throughout the route and the choices she makes. The game establishes very early on that it isn't just a love story of some spicier scenes and bits of horror thrown in, which is totally fine, but it's a game that wants to be a horror title exploring dark themes and realities through the veneer of a route-based love story. One that also happens to have a very memorable protagonist. Out of all the titles I've played in the genre, Kyoji stands out as one of the most fleshed out, well-developed, and frankly realistic leads that I've seen. Rather than being some know-it-all that can solve everything and always knows just what to do, he's an average, passionate, hot-headed dude with everything that entails. On the positive side, that's a strong sense of justice to help the people he loves, compassion for his friends and family, and a drive to make things right. On the negative side, he's often immature, not particularly rational, has misconceptions about people that lead him to judge others, be it conscious or subconscious, and his hot-headedness gets him involved in multiple bad situations throughout the game that can be severely compromising for everyone around him. I think what makes him most interesting though is that the story doesn't try to center itself around him and his actions. He's about as powerless as anyone else, afflicted with more than his fair share of troubles that the story spends equal time dwelling on alongside the others. All put together, Kyoji feels less like the central driving character of the story and more like one of many caught up in something huge. Helping with this is the way the prose is written from a more novellic, third-person POV. We don't spend the game inside Kyoji's head, but rather a nameless, faceless narrator extrapolates on situations and provides details unaffected by the events of the story. It's not something you often see in these kinds of games, and it leads to a distinctly different mood while reading. Furthermore, the prose doesn't pride itself on being particularly bizarre or purple like a title such as Jisatsu 101 or DZ-Ray. Instead, the way I describe it is compact and functional. There's an art to how it manages to present a lot of often complex information with simple words and short descriptions that never require stopping in your tracks to try and parse what's being said. Even playing in Japanese, where I'm not nearly as fluent as I am in English, I still found it very easy to make out what's being said. I don't think this is something that'll really grab the attention of an average player, and that is a massive compliment. Fluid and parsable prose is not easy to create, nor is it very noticeable unless you're a writer or critic, but it sure is easy to spot prose that feels wrong. Also, I'll talk more about this later so I avoid derailing too hard off of character discussions, but the quality and style of the prose is very consistent between both the Japanese and the English writing, so you aren't missing anything if you decide to go one way or the other. Though you will be missing out on something if you only read one of the three main routes, despite the game making you read all three to actually progress. Bad segue! Gore's three main heroines, Akane, Aoi, and Kika, are all equally intriguing with interesting routes, with Akane being the more typical childhood best friend archetype, Aoi being the quiet, shy girl with a challenge past, and Kika being the rich, affluent girl who puts on composed airs but secretly struggles with life. None of those are too special on the surface, but it's really the way they're developed and humanized that makes them shine. Out of the three, I would probably say Kika and her route are my favorite. It's a pretty deep-cut exploration of family trauma and the fears of one's own sexual desires, and while it does have some problems with overuse of erotic scenes, it still paints an overall picture of what it feels like to live with family who's more subtly abusive than just hitting their kids, and with a disdain for your own lust. She could have just been left as a pretty rich girl everyone wants to be with, but only Kyoji gets because he's just that good at wooing women, but instead we got those uncomfortable trauma and sexual horror angles that require Kyoji to confront his own biases towards the supposed dirtiness of lustful women, and for her to accept that aspect of herself. The other two are less my thing, but still pretty dang good. Akane's route deals with shared sexual abuse and how her and Kyoji have to grow past it, each in different ways, while Aoi's route deals with the effects of Akane's patronizing behavior and her own self-hate. All of this ties back into the greater theme of coming of age and moving beyond your past, but the specific things the story chooses to hone in on go far deeper than a basic parable about growing up sucks, but you gotta do it. Though Meitaro had a huge hand in this project, from scripting to directing and writing many of the erotic scenes, a lot of the credit for the directions characters were taken and the way they're handled I think can be attributed to Matsuri's work with the writing. Her perspective on life as a woman lends a very unique feel to it all that I don't think would have felt quite the same otherwise. The story has a real emphasis placed on making social bonds and conflicts feel like real bonds and conflicts, all handled, well, realistically, as well as depicting the troubles women face earnestly. I especially want to shout out Yamiko here, Kyoji's protective older cousin and guardian, for being by far one of the most well-written women in her 20s that I've seen in media like this. She's got this very charming exterior as a tired gal who just wants to laze around all day, eating horrible convenience store curry and being lazy with her work to the point you wonder how she's able to maintain her job, and yet you see early on that she's incredibly competent and smart when needed of her, and more than capable of performing all the duties she needs to. As the game progressed and I learned more about her past, I sympathized with her more and more and saw a lot of people that I know in her, to the point that I could probably see myself coming back to this game in my late 20s when I'm exhausted with life and say, wow, she's literally me! You also got characters like the intentionally less likable Sadashima and co, the school bullies who sit at the top of the social ladder, manipulating and abusing those around them, Kyoji's good buddy Genta, who acts as an all-around emotional support and great bro, and oh, also motherfucking Yoshiki, a god-tier side character. He acts as both a driving force to keep the plot moving forward at multiple points, revealing bits of the horror mystery and pushing forward where Kyoji sometimes can't, but he also acts as sort of an older brother figure to him, staying calm, cool, and collected while Kyoji just wants to barge into things. Pretty much any moment he shows up is a 10 out of 10 one, and especially late in the story he's fascinating. Okay, I can't beat around the bush any longer, let's talk about the stars of the show, Yuka and Gore. These two, without any doubt in my mind, steal the show and are the best in the game. From the moment they're introduced of Yuka's haunting words telling Kyoji welcome back, and all of the incredible moments of Gore doing absurd shit, both cool and cruel, to the way their arcs are wrapped up in the closing hours, they manage to stay consistently captivating as both villains and Yuka as a sympathetic figure, slowly built up and expanded throughout the plot. While some people do have mixed feelings on Yuka in particular, which I'll get to later in the spoilers section, I found her thoroughly captivating every which way she was presented. When she's seen as an innocent child, she's cute as hell and I want to protect her, and when she's being cruel and horrible to others, it's always in some way that's fascinating from a thematic and character standpoint. What's most interesting to me is how her sometimes cruel and antagonistic behavior is contrasted by her moments of strong sadness and fear. The genuine shock she feels when she's rejected by Kyoji, the pain she endures when hurt in fights, the bits of her inner fears that slip through the cracks of the exterior she's built up, it keeps her from being an absolute villain even in her darkest moments, as through subtext and bits of her past, you can always tell there's something deeper going on than just her being a shit kid. She is, by far, one of the most captivating eroge villains I've seen, and her presence would not be nearly as strong were it not for her mysterious and absurd companion. Gore's screaming show consistently takes the spotlight anytime he's on screen, with his cacophonic and aggressive themes, bizarre manner of speaking, carelessness about the acts he commits, and feverish dedication to Yuka. He also helps keep things from getting too horrifically dark. Comparing him to a clown isn't all that wrong given his frantic energy, never-ending excitement, and endless arsenal of methods to entertain Yuka with. He's even got his own little clown car. But seriously, Gore's absurdity is both the most unsettling shit in the world sometimes, and other times helps things from becoming too bleak. The contrast with him and Yuka works well from a horror standpoint too, mixing together the terror of a cosmic eldritch being and the sadness of knowing a villain has lived a far more tragic life than one might ever understand. It makes every scene with the two hit that much harder, especially when you see just how happy Gore makes Yuka while the two do horrible things together. Thankfully, or perhaps not thankfully depending on your taste in horror, those terrible things are primarily psychological rather than viscerally brutal. If you're only playing for good endings, then there's maybe 2 or 3 scenes of extreme gore on screen, at least one of which has no sexual element. If that's too much to bear though, then there's multiple censorship options within the game's settings to censor just images or text and images, among a ton of others that are more standard. Character voice muting, volume controls, text auto advance, and so on. They've even got voice lines for each option. As someone who's totally neutral on gore and edoguro but enjoys psychological horror, I found the way both are employed in GSS captivating throughout the experience. And just knowing the game is capable of showing horrific things gives this feeling that things could turn darker at any given scene, and the methods of breaking people that Gore and Yuka choose and the slow torture the characters endure provides an immense amount of development across all the different routes. And while I would like to say that all of them are equal in quality, well, therein lies my main criticism of GSS. There's a definite gulf between the first half of the game and the back half. You can clear the 3 main heroine routes in any order you choose, with Akane, Aoi, Kika being the recommended, and I also highly recommend that, and once you've cleared those, an additional 2 following Yamiko and Yuka are unlocked. The last 2 I feel have far more intriguing character drama, more pronounced themes, and also stand out for how they choose to handle their romances. I like seeing cute couples getting together in spite of horrible things happening around them, but I also enjoy the very mature way in which Yamiko's route handles complex romantic and familial troubles, and Yuka's route resolves in such a heart-tuggingly earnest and frankly realistic way for relationships that I can't help but fawn over it. Comparatively, Akane's route is good and has some very strong handling of its themes, but is most memorable for how it lays a strong foundation for the rest of the game to work off of. Aoi's route is good, but feels a bit incomplete thematically until you've gotten the full picture of the story, and Kika's route works great on its own, but again just doesn't have the same punch that these last 2 routes do. They take the game from a title that I think is pretty good to a strong 2006 Game of the Year contender, though I don't want to rag on them too badly. Even if it were just them, I'd still be able to confidently recommend this game, and I can't say I understand the people who say the game is mid till you get through them. Nah, this shit rocks all the way through. It's just a matter of it rocking like a 7.5 versus a 9 out of 10. And part of what makes it so good are the vibes of the whole experience. When GSS wants to be creepy and unsettling, it succeeds at it amazingly. When it wants to be mysterious, and there is always an undercurrent of mysteries tied to folklore, cults, and dark pasts, it does it with flying colors. And when it wants to be a slice of life that portrays life for all the monotony and hell that exists in it, it gets it right. But put bluntly, GSS has some fucking vibes that make the whole experience captivating from hour 1 to hour 15. Vibes that I seriously don't think you're gonna find many other places. It's a game that manages to feel true to life and engrossing just by the specific ways in which everything is set up, shown to you, and through how brilliantly the dialogue is written. If I had to compare it to anything else I've experienced, I would say it feels a shocking amount like Jisatsu 101. Now, there are many differences. For instance, this is a finished video game. Jisatsu is not a finished video game, but there's also a lot of key similarities. Third-person prose, psychological horror often rooted in traumas, and especially the shit going on with the real world in Gore's world that reminded me a lot of that game. Though rather than being played as something kind of sci-fi and philosophical like it is in that game, here it's played a lot more straight, I suppose. It has a lot of thematic importance and subtlety, but it's also often just some outright spooky shit that I adore. The entire time I was playing this game, I couldn't shake getting the same vibes I got from that lovely little scrunkly mess of a title, but consistently well executed and less rooted in deep subcultures of its time. I guess one of the main contributing factors to the feeling is that both games are set in school to varying degrees and portrayed in similarly negative lights. It's an uncomfortable place teeming of drama and social hierarchies perpetuated by abusive people where some are loved and others become the public punching bags, but no one is without a whole dump truck full of trauma. I've never been in school, I was sheltered most of my life, but that description and atmosphere checks out a lot more of all the experiences I've heard from people than some happy-go-lucky time where everything is good and well. And the game does its absolute best to engage with everything it presents and the effects it has on people, particularly with Sadashima being an irredeemably fucking horrible person who does horrible things. It's all executed very well, as are the mystery elements of the story. The game constantly drops little hints and slowly builds up to larger and larger questions that all resolve in a satisfying conclusion with few if any problems left floating, a large mystery made up of smaller threads that tie perfectly into individual character dilemmas and struggles. There is something I need to be clear about with GSS though. Even though this game isn't super gory like the title might imply, even though it's far from the most hardcore brutal thing that I'm aware of, the way it aims to be true to real emotions and fears and pains can hit incredibly close sometimes, and there were scenes in this game I found straight up triggering, including, well, everything I'll list out on screen shortly. If you don't want out of context spoilers, then look away till the funny music stops, but if you're sensitive to some content, then I recommend looking just to be safe. Okay, you're safe to turn back now. This is not to say the content isn't well used. Something GSS deserves praise for is just how sensitively it handles subjects such as sexual assault, female lust, familial abuse, and PTSD, to name a few. I won't make conjectures on Matsuri's personal life, but I will say she genuinely seems to understand these and other subjects and how to write them in a real, honest way, without falling into the trap of having gross and objectifying scenes for the sake of making a few people horny at the cost of everyone else's enjoyment and thematic cohesion. That said, this game does go a bit overboard with erotic content at points. It's not a big enough problem to ruin the pacing or bring the experience down, but it did get a bit overwhelming to me, especially on the bad ends, which tend to be heavier on the Edo content, and the more meaningless Edo at that, since I think a lot of what you get to see in the main routes has significance to the characters and the atmosphere of the story. Still though, judging on its own merits detached from the story, it's pretty fine erotica. As previously mentioned, Meitoa wrote these scenes and I think did a great job doing so. It's mostly quite vanilla outside of the horror scenes, and if you're into heterosex, then there's a lot here for you that'll be appealing. There's even some bi and lesbian scenes for the fruitier ones in the audience, though these are few and far between. If you want a gay black psych game, then Yami no Koe has you covered. Regardless, I would not recommend skipping any of it though, if not just because it means you'd be depriving yourself of some of Ueda Meitoa's art, and that's a goddamn sin. His style has always been amazing, and this game came out at the point in his career where I think he really managed to refine it. Not to the point of something like Dead and Aegis' godly art, but even at this point I'd say his work is as memorable and impactful as something like Takeuchi's on Fate's Day Night. The soft but distinct shading, the gorgeous hair and makeup, the expressiveness, the way character portraits and poses tell you so much about them at a glance, and of course, the fashion and the character designs. The basic school uniform is simple but elegant in that simplicity, and each individual character's sense of style is totally different from one another. Aoi rocks some cool metal outfits that contrast with her shy demeanor, Akane has this cute tomboyish air to her, Kika dresses plainly and simply yet still with drip, Yamiko never quite looks put together, and of course Yuka's outfit is some fucking peak gothic Lolita. I adore all of these as well as the designs of the characters on a basic level, with special props going to Meitoa's ability to draw the girls as all having subtly different bodies beyond just the size of their breasts. Some are a bit chubbier, some have different breast shapes, some are more petite, and some are taller. It's not mind-blowing body diversity, but the girls don't all feel like they're appealing to one idea of a feminine form. Also, shoutouts to Yoshiki for being one of the hottest fucking guys I've seen in an Edo game not specifically made for women. The only complaint I can really make in this regard is that I'm not a fan of Sadashima's fangirls consisting of women who are more traditionally ugly. I get that it's kinda just an anime trope and no harm was intended, but it always leaves me feeling a bit iffy regardless of intentions. I feel that's ultimately a nitpick though and easy to overlook in the grand scheme of things since the game's great and the overall presentation is spotless. A huge variety of backgrounds, standing sprites, animated skyboxes, which are an absolute rarity, a slick and easy to navigate UI, and a truckload of gorgeous CGs that make major events stand out and stay memorable long after playing. Meitoa and the other artists working on this game, S. Machin and Kuroki Yusaku, absolutely killed it with the art of this title in every single way, as did the sound and music designers. Aside from the excellent opening and ending composed by the band Denkishiki Karan Ongoku Shukan, former Riverhill Soft sound designer turned freelance composer Akaki Tomohiro did all of the BGM, and it's damn good. There's a total of 17 original compositions that play throughout the game, with many of them having variations that range from removing an instrument or two or being starkly different, such as the free versions of the school theme. 17 tracks for a 15-hour game I think is already pretty good to start with, but add the additional arrangements on top and you end up with something that avoids being musically repetitious and has a more defined atmosphere. I've made extensive use of the music in the background here since it's both great for general tone setting and as BGM, but in the context of the story there's quite a few moments where it hits hard. It really feels like Tomohiro was in touch with the rest of the team in terms of how well the compositions flow with the title and how they're applied within the context of the game. And one more thing on the note of presentation before I get into spoilers and my thoughts on the themes, and this is a big thing, let's talk about the translation. As mentioned in the intro, it was done by Just USA with a whole ton of people working on it. So to everyone involved, who I can't all name but I'll all put on screen, thank you for making this happen. Most pertinent to this video, however, is the translation, with a script edited by Fallen Guru and translated by Zach Seal. I don't know too much about the former, but I've talked with Zach on multiple occasions and consider him a good dude and a good translator, one who's worked on a couple of pretty notable games. Dead and Aegis, Tokyo Necro, and Bust a Fellow to name some huge ones, along with Black Psyche's first localized game, Sadistic Blood. Knowing him might make me biased, and if you think it makes my opinion sus, then, well, I can't really help you with that, but I played the first hour of a Japanese version just to see for myself how well the title was translated, and yeah, Yeah, shit's good! The prose reads and flows the same, character voices are amazingly preserved, and as a whole, there's not a ton for me to say other than you'll be getting the same experience between both languages. I will also say, on that note, Gore is a pretty manageable read if you want to play this in Japanese. It's not as easy as something like Yami no Koe, but as far as I've read, there's nothing that'll trip someone up more than any other average VN, and the short to mid-length of the title makes it very approachable for learners. Something I'm very thankful for, because I sincerely want more people to play this game for, well, pretty personal reasons, I guess. The themes of Gore's Screaming Show are deep, deep cuts to me. At its core, it's a game about trauma and the pains of growing up, handled in ways that I think anyone can understand and sympathize with, but as someone who's been deeply affected and hurt in similar ways to some characters in the game, it's one of the few stories I've seen that really, truly reflected some of my own thoughts and feelings back to me in a way that made me feel heard. In order to get into all of this, I'm going to be spoiling huge chunks of the main story haphazardly, as well as entire character arcs, reveals, and so on. The section is also going to be featuring some dark topics, including sexual assault, familial abuse, isolation, PTSD, and self-harming among others, so if you're sensitive to any of those, I would suggest skipping. But not before getting a brief positive break in the form of thanking all my cool patrons and shouting out channels that you should watch. Well folks, it is once again the time for channel and life updates and cool shoutouts. This video sadly got delayed despite my best attempts to stay on schedule, first by a pretty rough time for my mental health during Christmas and up for the first week of January, and then catching a cold right after, all while juggling a bunch of game music work for travel and life funds. Fun! Good news is that I'm all recovered now and back to making steady progress on everything, so hopefully the next video will be closer to on time. Maybe. Still, as always, I am incredibly grateful to all of my patrons and Ko-fi donators who make these videos possible and keep me going and funded even when I'm not quite on time. Between the YNK video in December and this one in January, we've finally hit $750 a month! That's roughly what I need to live paycheck to paycheck, so I no longer have to worry if I'll be able to feed or house myself anymore during dry spells of game music work. We did it! We fucking did it! I say thank you all the time in these videos, but seriously, thank you, everybody. I'm happy that I can call this basically my main job now, that it's one that I love doing, and that I have real security in my financial life. And as Patreon continues to go up, so will my quality of life and ability to focus on videos. It means the world to me to know that I'm safe and sound, so again, thank you. I'm glad everyone likes this content enough to support me like this. I really didn't think that in about a year this would go from just a tiny little side thing I did for fun to the main thing I do, but I'm really happy. And like usual with this power of an audience, I would like to direct y'all's attention to some other channels to watch when you're done checking out my content. Much as YouTube doesn't really want video creation to be a community thing sometimes, my content would not be what it is without the work of others inspiring me, so here's two channels I've been enjoying lately. First up is Mara Ganger, who focuses mainly on covering spooky, artsy, or just plain odd games, like Silvercase, Galarians, and Yume Nikki. Her most recent video on Planet Laika is the one that I first saw thanks to YouTube recommendations, and it's totally sold me on their stuff. They've got a great structure to their reviews, witty humor, superb editing, and a fantastic aesthetic that altogether adds up to being the kind of shit I dig watching. I can't recommend checking out their content enough, especially if you're a fan of more surreal games. Second is Bored Ronin, a cool dude that also covers visual novels. His reviews tend to be a lot shorter and more succinct on average, only sometimes going over the 25-minute mark. And that's a compliment. His style is easy to follow, and with the short length of the videos in general, it can be great for getting the gist of a title and whether or not you'll enjoy it. That said, I also really enjoy his longer content, especially his video on the RPG Maker title Black Souls, which people have requested me to cover, and I might someday, but in the interim, I really recommend watching his video on it. I got a lot of homework to do, namely actually playing the Souls games first. And also a quick roundup of some eroge and VN news. I haven't seen a whole ton as of late that's caught my eye, which, I don't know, maybe that's a Twitter algorithm betraying me, maybe I'm just not paying attention, but there's two standouts for me. First, Rants is now available on GOG and Jast, which I can't say I expected at all, but I'm really damn happy for. More Alice Soft is always good. And second, the cult hit RPG Maker title Demon's Roots is finally in English. I have heard tons of amazing things about this one, and while I haven't played it yet, I can say I've been adoring its predecessor King Exit, and a lot of friends
friends swear by both games being tip-top quality. Since there weren't any Patreon Q&As this time, that's all I got to say for now. But if you want to ask me some for the next video and have your name scrolling on the screen like all these cool people, then please consider heading over there or to GOTY for a one-time donation. The support of generous viewers keeps me going and able to make videos like this, and I'm always grateful for it. In exchange, you'll get to see videos early sometimes as well as uncensored, but if you're not able to donate, that's fine too. Liking, commenting, subscribing, and especially sharing these videos around with people in spaces you think might enjoy them is a huge help on its own and something I'm very appreciative of. Seriously, just thank you everyone for keeping me going financially, leaving kind words that make my day, and supporting my videos by passing them around and engaging with them. Y'all are the best, seriously. Now then, back to the show. I mentioned earlier that I feel GSS becomes far stronger in the final two routes, and so for this section I'm mainly going to be focusing on those as well as the overall story. Though I do have a fair bit to say about Yuka that I want to throw out into the ether, even if it pales in comparison to the number of thoughts that I have on Yuka. While Akane and Aoi have their own individual themes that didn't resonate that strongly with me, Yuka's hit me way more personally, being about family trauma, sexual oppression, and the horror of feeling ashamed of one's own body. Those may not be things that a lot of people will click with, and certainly I've seen a lot of people call this route the worst of the free and internet reviews, but I think the way it handles these subject matters is actually pretty fascinating and multifaceted. Yuka's trauma and repression comes primarily from an embarrassing and lewd experience she had with an iron bar as a child, leading to her mother lashing out at her for being dirty and perverted. One of seemingly many examples of her mother being cruel and uncaring towards her, pressuring her to be successful and prim and proper, and leaving no room for her to exist as her own person. The effects of this are present in every part of her being. Her mother hurts her, yet she still seeks to appease her. She has to lie to be able to have a real social life. She has basically no real friends at school. She keeps people at a distance, and she's terrified of her own body and feelings of wanting pleasure. And the way all of this is represented feels a hell of a lot like complex PTSD. It's the result of years of abuse at the hands of her mother at the least. With her father seemingly often out of the picture due to travel and life, what she's left with is someone who tears away at her with tiny cuts over time, and bigger ones like the incident with the iron bar just make those wounds larger and never heal. I do get people saying this route seems kind of unrealistic. If you aren't familiar with how the effects of abuse like this manifest and the subtext that point towards her mother being repeatedly abusive, it could come off as overreacting, but for me it felt incredibly realistic to how my own trauma-addled brain used to respond to things before treatment, when I was a teenager scared of growing up and discovering themselves. That theme of self-discovery is everywhere in GSS, and what I love the most is that everyone has something to deal with that's different and it's all given equal weight. Hyoji has to realize he's just a kid that can't save everybody, Aoi has to realize she can't run away from her problems, Yoshiki must move on past the grief of losing his wife, and so on. And for everyone, these things are scary to face and deal with. No one wants to accept that they're powerless or that they're never going to feel closure from the death of a loved one. No one wants to have their deepest flaws reflected back to them. And even when we want to try and move on, sometimes we can't without first unpacking a lifetime of hurt and sorrow. Such is the case with Yuka. Saying that Yuka's lived a difficult life is the biggest fucking understatement of the century. Despite appearances, she's the firstborn of the family. Sickly and unwell, she lived much of her childhood being scorned by her younger sister Momone, and what little social life she had did not go well because of her. Momone encouraged the other two girls, Yamiko and Sayumi, to aid in teasing Yuka, culminating in her being trapped down a well for hours, unfortunately occurring right when her first period happened. Said well happened to be tied to occult phenomena during World War II, and in there she finds a gem that lodges itself into her body, freezes it at her current age, stifles her ability to manage her emotions, and gives her control over a demon that she affectionately names Gore Screaming Show after a TV movie. Even after all of this, she still suffers abuse at the hands of her parents and Momone, killing the former before meeting Kyoji and cursing the latter to old age some years later after continued abuse broke her. And the only light in her life through all of this was meeting Kyoji at a festival, the first person to really show her kindness and compassion as an equal. All of this tragic history is why she is the way she is, why she hurts people, why she's scared of the world, why she killed Yoshiki's wife Sayumi, and why she's obsessed with Kyoji even if he doesn't remember her until the very end of the game. There are a lot of hints building up to all these reveals in the first three routes, but it doesn't all come to a head until playing Yamiko and her own back-to-back.
One of the main criticisms I've seen of this game is that none of this is enough to justify Yuka's cruelty and her actions as a character. I've seen people say, yeah, it's awful she was trapped down a well and was mistreated, but does that really justify killing people? Even characters in the game doubt whether or not it's okay to let her live after everything awful she's done, so Matsuri was definitely aware people were going to feel this. And I can say I understand that on a surface level, but I don't think the point is justification, nor is it right to hate her. I need to preface where I'm coming at this with some context. Though I've hinted at some of this in the video and with others, I am not exactly the most put together person. I'm someone who spent a majority of their life being isolated from the world. I had many of my teenage years ripped away from me by sexual abuse. I've been bullied and harassed for as long as I've been around other people, and because of all of it, I've ended up with a lot of trauma as well as PTSD that has, at multiple points in my life, crippled me and still affects me deeply. Trauma doesn't just impede your ability to think rationally, it impedes your ability to think, period, and it impedes your ability to function in the world. And there's been so many times where I've locked up and only been able to speak in a mess of vile directed towards myself, if I could even talk at all. Meltdowns are explosive, miserable, exhausting. They put my body in a state of sensory overload and meltdown and leave me physically weak and ailed. And that's kind of what Yuka is stuck living with, isn't it? The stone inside her froze her physically at the age of 14 in the state she was in while trapped in the well, filled with uncontrollable childlike emotions of hatred and sadness from being hurt so much by her own sibling and friends, and fear of the cruelty of the world she lives in. Emotions that also, because of the stone, she can't calm down from. What she feels stays with her for a long time and doesn't simply cool down. What saves her is ultimately the kindness that Kyoji shows her. What allows her to move on and realize the entire world won't hurt her is the kindness of another person who sees past the part of her that's abused and broken, the kindness of another person who truly loves her for her. And once she's saved, with the stone inside her no longer going rampant and her mind finally freed from fear, she's able to start moving on and find her own life, not through another person, but through her own eyes. I think my experiences are part of why I'm willing to defend her character from the bottom of my heart, because yeah, everything that happens is fucked. Everything that happens is horrible and inexcusable, and she is in fact neurodivergent and a minor. But trauma doesn't let you function normally. Trauma can give you these feelings. It can make you hate the world, it can make you hate people on a dime and bond with others in an instant. It can destroy your ability to understand things rationally because you're so goddamn scared of everything. If I were stuck in that state with all my emotions at their height and ceasing to go away like Yuka was at the age of 14, when my suicidal ideation and my ability to cope with my sexual abuse and life in general was failing, and someone gave me a weapon of mass destruction with a funny clown face that entertained me and kept me safe, I probably would have done awful things too. In Minecraft. Her attachment to Kyoji is, too, not abnormal for someone traumatized. People want to be safe and happy. We want people we can rely on, and for someone who's been denied that their entire life, it's easy to latch on to whoever is willing to lend you a hand and turn that in your head into flat-out unrequited love, no matter what the other person says about you. It's not healthy or okay, but it's what trauma can do to somebody, and relationships built on that end up far less stable than those with a healthier foundation. It's part of why I love Matsuri's decision to have Yuka leave Kyoji at the end to pursue her own life instead. Perhaps the ultimate consequence of all the cruelty that Yuka endured, however, is the tragedy of trauma repeating. Yuka was never saved or helped at her most vulnerable, and so all she could do was continue to lash out, including against those she knew as a child. Yamiko managed to make it out unscathed by some complexities, but Momone's cruelty reinforced Yuka's hatred and came back in full force against her, and Sayumi was later killed at Yuka's hands. This is what sets Yoshiki off and leads to him swearing her as a villain he needs to kill, purely for his own revenge. He doesn't really have any pretense about being a good person for it, nor does he try and justify it too much. He's just doing what he feels is right by him by hunting Yuka and Gore down and attempting to kill both of them. But this never works out. He ends up dying in some way in the three main routes. In Yamiko's route, it's ultimately up to her to show Yuka the kindness she needs to be freed of her pain, and in Yuka's route, he has to face the needlessness of his own vengeance. He has to accept that for everything horrible she's done, killing her won't bring his wife back. It won't really make him happy. It won't do anything but leave another person dead. Violence is not always the answer to violence, and retribution is more often than not selfish and denies the opportunity for someone to change. This doesn't make what Yuka did okay, but knowing her circumstances, knowing how she's been cursed, is it right to kill her? I don't think so, and seemingly neither does Matsuri. There's one particular scene that I think shows how fear sits at the core of Yuka's being in the game. It's in her route when her and Kyoji decide to go to the beach. The water is calm, the day is nice, and they're mostly alone, and yet she's scared of getting near the water. The sea is big and she's small. It's a vast wide ocean, something she's never seen before. Of course, that's kind of a ridiculous thing to think. Obviously, just stepping in the ocean or being near it isn't gonna kill you. And so, Kyoji laughs it off, which Yuka doesn't get. To her, that seems like a perfectly reasonable thing to worry about. So he takes her hand, walks her towards the ocean, and pushes her into it. She yelps and runs back to him upset. He tries to get her to walk barefoot because it's nice, and so she does, and she can't answer whether or not she enjoys it. She just doesn't know. I think why this scene sticks with me so much is just because of how it juxtaposes her anger with fear. She gets upset at Kyoji for not getting why she doesn't like the beach, and yet moments before that we see the anger isn't coming from a place of pure rage. She's just scared and doesn't get this and doesn't know how to react. I'm not someone who lashes out with anger basically ever, but this scene still really resonated with me because I feel like it really gets what living while traumatized is like. No one wants to be hurt or scared, and new things can be both hurtful and scary. To everyone else in the world, that probably just looks like being overly sensitive. I mean, it doesn't make sense that the beach is scary. It also doesn't make sense that talking to people is scary, being near people is scary, or why someone being lightly upset can be scary. And yeah, I'm someone who's overly sensitive in a lot of ways. I can't deny that it doesn't really make sense why the first time I went to a social event in my life on my own I felt like crying, or why so many new experiences trigger this deep fear of being hurt. I can't deny that I'm hurt when people laugh at my absurdities sometimes as a way to say, see, it's fine, you don't have to be bothered. I can't deny that I ask utterly nonsensical questions because some part of my brain is telling my whole body to run away from the big scary ocean even though I know it's fine. But I can't shake things off because they're fine sometimes. I don't know if my first time going to the beach on a nice summer day is going to be a really happy memory. I don't know if any of my first times, if anything, will be happy. Because for many points in my life, I've felt the same as Yuka, a fragile girl scared of the world because the world has been cold to me for as long as I can remember, and I can't shake that frost off with a good laugh like I should be able to. It's really only in the last handful of years that I've known warmth, and even if it can't heal everything, even if I'm still sad and scared sometimes and feel like the world might tear me apart whole, I've gotten better. The warmth that people have shown me has let me grow up. It's saved me. It's hard for me to make definitive statements about the best game of the year for any given year. If you ask me for my favorite game of 2001, then I'm more liable to just list off titles that I enjoyed from that year like MGS2 and Ace Combat 4. And similarly for 2006, it's pretty hard for me to pick just one game that defines the year for me and really stands out. But if you were to ask me at this instance what resonates with me the most, what stands out to me the most in 06, it's Gore's Screaming Show. The writing, the music, the visuals, the game design, everything combines together to make an experience that's not just enjoyable to play, but emotionally resonant. It can be a challenging read, but that challenge comes from how real and honest it is rather than from seeking to shock readers. Is it gonna resonate with everyone? I can't say that for sure. I've definitely seen some people have mixed sentiments on some parts of the games that I adore, and I do agree the last 2/5 of the game are far better in every regard than the other chunk. But as a whole, GSS is one of the most memorable gaming experiences I've had recently, and a title I see myself looking back on fondly as the years go by, as I experience more media, as I grow up and realize more about myself, and one that I desperately want others to experience for themselves. And now that it's finally in English and accessible by a wider audience, you have no more excuses not to play this, besides time and money. Which are pretty big excuses. I forfeit that. But still, you can find it for $30 on both JAST and GOG, with Steam available as another option if you're a real stickler for it, but I don't recommend it. Steam sucks and you should support other options where available. Gore's Screaming Show is a game that I think anyone who enjoys narrative-driven games needs to play. Not just fans of visual novels, but fans of story-focused titles, period. It's a title that represents so many deep-cut and complex emotions brilliantly, with so many smaller themes intertwining into one larger thematic concept, that I think there's going to be something that affects a lot of people here if they're willing to open themselves up to being heard. It's one that I think really understands the pains of growing up and moving on in our lives beyond just a superficial level. Growing up isn't just our bodies changing and having more responsibilities piled onto us, it's facing our worst fears and our greatest weaknesses. It's realizing that we all have something in us we have to confront, and for some that might be easier than for others, but even the most challenged of us all, those of us who have grown up scared and afraid and lashing out at the world, we can grow too. There's people who love us, and there's warmth that can help us save ourselves.